My name is David Landry. I'm one half of Class Bookstore. On behalf of myself and my wife, we want to welcome you first and foremost to Class Bookstore, where our motto is "We make it happen." Tonight, you are in for a treat. We will have an intimate conversation between two individuals who are not only athletes but also sports enthusiasts and also politically savvy and all of the things. So I'm gonna get off the mic and we're going to pass it on to our moderator for the evening, Tommy Roots. I'll give it up.
Thank you, David. I think you're too kind to put me in the same class and category of an athlete as this man right here. I think that should always be acknowledged. The amount of dedication that you guys put into your craft and the elite of the elite, you know what I mean? Whether you play one season or 15 seasons is incredible. I mean, I looked it up and you're one of 26,000 men who have played in the NFL. So salute to that. But we're here today because your story is more than the NFL. The name and the title of the book, Still Growing, Still Learning, Still Me. Such an apt title. When I read the book, could really see your journey into activism, into political awareness and knowledge. But I always like to start from the beginning and start from the scene. And I think that's the Still Me, right? It's a play off your name, but I think it was something that was always in you that was awakened, you know what I mean, as opposed to a discovery. So let's talk about the beginning. Let's talk about your upbringing. Let's talk about growing up in Minnesota and in California. And just to give people a little background on what makes you.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for coming. So I made sure not to write this book like an autobiography. I wanted to really get to the point of my activism, why I decided to take a knee to the national anthem, and how that changed my life afterwards. The important parts that I share in the book are that I grew up in Oceanside, California, which is close to a military base, Camp Pendleton. All the men in my life, being that my parents weren't together growing up, were my coaches, and they were all Marines. And so when the narrative came that we were anti-military, anti-police, anti-American, it didn't make any sense that people could say this about me, knowing that every single person that influenced my life on the male side had served, in the Marines. My Pop Warner coach, who I consider like my second father, who I was with since I was 7 years old, was the person that I called the night before I decided to get involved in the protests. The person that I cared the most about what they thought if I were to take a knee. And in that conversation, he, in short, told me that not to get involved. He asked me not to take a knee to the national anthem. And I told him that I would pray on it and that I would sleep on it and do what I thought was best for myself and what I felt the most called to do. And so, I obviously got up the next morning and decided that this is what I needed to do. But growing up, I grew up in a single-parent household, the last of 5 children. My mom had a lot of trauma in her life, and so she used alcohol to cope with her upbringing. And so she wasn't really around a lot. And I played football so I could be physical and be violent and not have to get in trouble for fighting at school. And it happened to be that I also, was good at it. And people recognized that very early. And so I never really had any pushback nobody tried to bully me. I never really saw any type of outward racism because people saw that I had this skill. I always, made their team better or whatever. And so I never felt any pushback until I decided to get involved in the protest.
Well, let's jump into it. So let's talk about that night. Let's talk about September 10th and September 11th. What was going through your mind? What were the feelings and emotions? I know you touched on it a little bit, and I know that conversation with your coach was a really pivotal moment. Let's how do we get to that point, right? And like, what are the nerves like? What's the feeling like? And it's September 11th too, and when you're choosing to do this, like, put us into that mindset.
Yeah, so basically what happened in 2016 is that I wanted to vote for the first time. Somebody participate? I wanted to vote for the first time. I was 24, I think, and I hadn't exercised my right. And for some reason, that year I was interested. And so I started watching the current events and the debates and seeing what's happening on the news. And because I knew nothing about politics, I was an athlete student. My dad played in the NFL as well. We didn't talk about politics in my home. Like I said, my mom wasn't really around enough for us to have these types of conversations. And so when it was time for me to vote, I had to start paying attention to figure out what side of the aisle I was going to be on and which candidates I liked. And the more that I paid attention, the more I saw black and brown folks being killed by police officers. And in the beginning, the way that the media can strew these narratives, it's like, oh, well, this person should have done this differently and they'd still be alive or what have you. And so in the beginning, I could see how in some of the situations, I guess, someone could have de-escalated the situation or whatever. But the more that I saw cases, the more I was like, this looks like blatant, where they're killing us and there is no like quote unquote justice. Right? And so while that was happening, I saw Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. I saw Eric Reed taking a knee. Well, at first they were sitting on the bench, actually. And I saw Megan Rapinoe, one of the women's national team players, and Maya Moore in the WNBA wearing a t-shirt. So I saw this opportunity for us to be able to use our platform to get involved. And like I said, I didn't know much about the space, and I was naive enough to think that we live in the greatest country in the world, we've got all the resources, the technology, that if we just present the problem, educate people, we'll get the solution, we'll wipe our hands clean, we'll find the next thing, and we'll solve that problem. And so, yeah, I was young and naive and didn't know any better. And so I got involved with the hopes of it being that simple and that clean, but that's not how it works. And so, yeah, the night before the game, I was a captain on this team of the Miami Dolphins that year, and I asked the head coach if I could host a player-only meeting. And so we got rid of all of our staff, and it was just the players in the room. And I got up in front of them with a couple of other guys, and I told the team that we wanted to do something together, a demonstration together if people were interested. But if not, like, we had guys on the team that were going to get involved in the demonstration on their own. And that started this big argument. Guys are yelling and screaming at us. There's a lot of cussing and just people that were worried about what their families would say because of the narrative. People that just wanted to play football. And then just guys that were there like, this is insignificant to me, so whatever. And so I had that conversation with my coach, I had the conversation with the team, and I slept on it. Talked to my agent, I talked to my girlfriend at the time, my girlfriend was the only one that was in support of me making this decision. My agent was like, wait, I was on a contract year, so they were just waiting for me to get my money. And I didn't talk to my parents or anyone else. Coach Joe said no. So I just went off a gut feeling. Thought that something was wrong, and I wanted to get involved.
So on that September 11th, you kneel, y'all play the game. I can imagine there's all kind of fireworks and everything because of what the day is. So afterwards, let's talk about that, when everything really starts to hit the fan, so to speak.
Yeah, so that game we lose. I have the worst drop of my career, like in any level, in this game. We lose a close game that we probably should have won. And immediately after, I'm like, I probably should just stick to the football shit, like the protests and the politics to other people, like I need to focus on ball, I'm worried about my contract. And immediately after the game, I ignored all interviews, which it's mandatory for us to take interviews after a game, but I wasn't prepared because not only did we lose the game, I felt like it was my fault, and now I was jumping into a new place. Like I said, I knew nothing about social movements, activism, anything. I just knew in my heart of hearts that something was wrong and I wanted to get involved. And so I was really in a strange spot of like, okay, do I continue to do this or do I, pull back and focus on the football stuff? And luckily, I had failed before. And I knew what the recipe for success was, and that was just to go back to work. So the next day at work, I'm like working on my hands and all that stuff, but also just immediately knew that I had to give up and start making some sacrifices at home. So I stopped playing video games and I started reading. I started listening to podcasts and finding different documentaries that I could watch.
What kind of things were you reading? What kind of podcasts?
So the first book that I read was given to me by my teammate Arian Foster, and it was The New Jim Crow. And so that book helped me to take statistics and data and back up the feeling that I had of what was happening in a lot of these cases, and then, behind closed doors and so on. And from there, I read John Lewis, then I read James Baldwin, and so it was just like reading about movements of the past and understanding the sacrifices that had been made, and that really eased, my mind around what we were experiencing, but also just empowered me to continue to move forward.
I like that you said that, the recipe for success is that you put your head down and you do the work. And it's obvious that you did the work to learn about the politics of what you were standing on. I read in the book that you started to participate more in the community. Let's talk about that and some of the experiences that you experienced in the community and some of the eye-opening experiences.
Yeah. I grew up in a super manipulative home. So I know how to manipulate situations, and what I did after the protest was I knew that I could get involved in a lot of community service work and learn about the community and figure out how I can give back. But I also knew that if I just showed up all the time, that people could disagree with the action of the protest, but they couldn't disagree with the action of me being in charity, and me giving back. And so for the next 3 or 4 seasons, every Tuesday is our off day, but the league usually makes the rookies on every team go out and do whatever community service event. And
I always wondered about that, how players get chosen for that.
the rookies are on duty for that.
Okay.
And sometimes they pay them, sometimes they don't. And what I did was like, all right, well, I'm a veteran player. I don't need to be there, but I'm going to go. And a lot of times I would go without my jersey or any type of recognition just to be there and really see what the Dolphins were doing in the community, but also, just show people that it wasn't Sundays that we care about this. It's every single day that we were going to try and do something to give back. And that helped me to, learn what the Dolphins were doing, but then also figure out, okay, how do I fill in some of these gaps? And so that's when we started our ride-along program with the Dolphins.
Okay.
And so we started working with the local law enforcement there. And
Yes, some pushback on that, huh?
yeah, just trying to bridge the gap between the community and law enforcement. And so I went to the roll call before the officers go out to work and wanted to introduce myself. In the same way, I stood up in front of them and I'm like, hey, you might have heard that I'm anti-police, but I'm not anti-police. I just want accountability. Right? If you're not doing anything wrong, then you shouldn't have any reason to hate me and vice versa. And I started a program with them where I had a football card company send me a bunch of football cards, and I gave them to all the officers to give out to kids that they see on the street. And so instead of the first time they see these kids being a time that they're asking them questions or harassing them or arresting them or what have you, they would have a face to a name, and thinking that that would help bridge the gap between the community. And at one of the roll calls, I went to shake all the officers' hands and introduce myself, and there was a group of guys that wouldn't even really look at me. I went to shake their hands, and they're kind of just like, and I didn't. Where we grew up,
Right.
we don't tell them like.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not gonna say anything. And then I thought about it. We went to the next roll call, bless you, and I thought about it a little. I'm like, and if these dudes can't shake my hand, I wonder what they're doing to the community. And so I said something to their superior, and then we figured out who those guys were, and I don't know what happened to them, what type of reprimanding they can do. But yeah, so that was kind of the situation that I was in, places that I was going to, I was trying my best to like extend the olive branch, and
Right.
it wasn't being received that way.
So you're just starting this protest, and you know us as fans, you know we're outside looking in, but you're inside. How did that go from there? Were players united on it? Was everybody all apart? You know, we're getting different versions from the media. You know what I mean, and different talking points and all this and that. And so, what was that like? Did you meet the man? You know, did you
Yeah.
meet Cap?
Yeah, so I'm half Mexican and half black. I mean, we would have guys in the locker room coming to me like, "You're not even black. Why do you care about this?" I had everyone from the owner, general manager, all the coaches, players on my team trying to get us to stop protesting. We started that year, I think, 1-4. So when you're losing, everything is magnified. So I had guys on the team telling me that we were losing because of the protests. And so there was a lot of pressure on us to stop.
Right.
And I didn't have any connection to or conversation with Eric or Colin, which is really interesting because I was telling you that I went and sat down for an interview with Nessa, his partner, a couple of days ago when I was in New York. And she explained to me that she thought that that was one of the more beautiful parts about the fact that we were all taking part of the protest, was that we didn't know each other.
Right.
But we all were like in sync in the fact of the things that we saw and the fact that we wanted to make change. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people assumed that we were like texting or organizing or something, but you know, we were also so far away from each other, trying to do our jobs,
Right.
dealing with the backlash that was happening. And so it was like constant trying to put out a fire.
And you know that speaks to the morality of it, the fact that you're able to be on code but not communicate with each other. But eventually you get to the Players Coalition, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. There's some controversy with that and how that was handled, and I guess the differing viewpoints of that.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, the NFL's answer to the protest was this nonprofit that they started called the Players Coalition, which was spearheaded by Malcolm Jenkins, Anquan Bolden, and somebody else. But Malcolm was basically the main person. And their thought process was, well, really they were trying to get us to stop taking a knee. And they thought that they could basically co-opt and hijack what we were doing by making a big donation to the Players Coalition that was donated towards social justice causes. And the big part that I would mention about the Players Coalition is that I felt relieved that I had read the books and watched the documentaries and done the work, because it was a classic case of supporting one group of guys, kind of lifting up and boosting their ego to be able to quiet another group of guys. Like that old school, we're gonna find the mark,
Right.
and we know that we
Willie
can,
Lynch of it. Yeah.
we know that we can overshadow what these guys are doing if we just give them a little money on the side. And these guys didn't know that this strategy was coming. And so in real time, I'm frustrated with them, but I'm also like a little bit understanding because I just know they don't know any better.
Right.
You're either choosing to hijack this movement, you don't know any better, or you don't care.
Yeah.
So that it was frustrating to deal with, but yeah, we had to separate ourselves from the Players Coalition, and I did my best to give them their credit in the book because they've done a lot of really great work since then. But ultimately, I think we had a lot of power at the time, and if we would have stuck together as players, we could have included Colin in these conversations,
Right.
or helped him get reinstated, or what have you. And a lot of the guys in the Players Coalition, their sentiment was that this was bigger than Colin. And I didn't see how they didn't recognize how blackballing the person who brought up these issues doesn't fall under that same category of social justice.
So you separate from the Players Coalition, and is this when your foundation comes about, or?
No, my foundation starts after I start going to therapy.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So after the first year of the protest, I was like always on my phone, reading everything on Twitter, reading Facebook, reading Instagram. And I just grew up like rough and tough, so I thought that I could read all that and just laugh it off, and that it wouldn't affect me. But after a year or so of that, I started to notice myself just becoming more hateful, definitely more prejudiced. I didn't really, I couldn't really talk to or fuck with any white people at the time. And it was because of what I was reading, man. I went to an all-white high school. And so I had parents of kids that I grew up with call me the N-word, call me a porch monkey, saying like all types of crazy stuff, like old school civil rights stuff.
Right.
And yeah, so like my whole perspective on the world changed, right? Like I said, I never had any pushback from anybody. And then all of a sudden, you know, they're dropping a hard R on me.
Yeah.
And so,
Had to mess you up.
but you know, like I said, I was young and I thought I was tough. And so I was reading all this stuff and I would be at home just like laughing and thinking it was funny. And when I started to realize that it was affecting me, my partner was realizing it too. And I had some stuff that I needed to deal with from my childhood with my parents. I had the weight of what was happening from the protest. And then I just had like some shit that I was also dealing with, you know, in my early 20s that I needed to handle myself. And so, yeah, she recommended that I go see a therapist. And I had never known anybody in my family to go to therapy.
Right.
So,
Let alone in the community, right?
you know, hard for men, hard for black men. And so I'm on the internet trying to find a therapist. I'm like, well, how do I do this? And for the longest time, I just kind of twiddled my thumbs around it. And then eventually at one of the events that I was working at in Miami, one of the community service events that I went to, I needed a therapist. And she gives me a card. And I knew that was like my moment, right? Like I had been kind of searching, but you know, the student was ready, so the teacher appeared.
That's a good point.
And yeah, so the next day I called her and I got on her schedule and I started working with her once a week for an hour. And I worked with her for about 2 years. I went and was clinically diagnosed as depressed at the time. I say that it was just like this dark cloud that was kind of looming over my life. I had gotten a new contract. I had got my degree, like all the goals that I had in my life, I had checked off.
That second contract is the one you try to get to as an athlete.
And so yeah, everything that I had hoped to do in my life, besides like win a Super Bowl and that type of stuff, but like the main goals I had checked off, but I didn't have consistent joy in my life. I was abusing drugs and alcohol, and those were the times that I was the most happy and felt the best about myself. And so when I came out from that depression is when I started the Kenny Stills Foundation, and we ran the Still Growing Center. And basically all the tools that I learned from my life coach and from my therapist, I put into a day camp.
Okay.
It's like a 4-hour camp. We talked about trauma.
What age range is?
We had kids from, ended up being like 8 to 18, but we wanted to be a little bit older, but we weren't going to tell the kids no. And so, yeah, we brought kids in and we talked to them about trauma. What are positive coping mechanisms to trauma? What is mindset? What's gratitude? What is neuroplasticity? We had black and brown instructors and professors coming in to talk about the mental health space and breathing techniques and yoga, and we fed kids nutritious meals that were healthy, and just tried to take everything that I had learned and put them into a one-day camp in hopes that when the storm comes, young people would then have the tools to be able to help themselves when the storm came.
Are you guys still putting on this camp? Is it a yearly thing or?
We haven't done it since then,
Okay.
but because after COVID happened, and then yeah, my career kind of came to an end, and so I've been on my own thing. But it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to doing again.
Let's talk about the after career journey. Because in the book you said you got to a point where you just lost all the joy in it. Was it from all of the knowledge that you were gaining and you just felt like you had a different purpose in mind? Or
My passion for football went away because I felt like I wasn't welcome in the place anymore. You know, so 2016 to 2020, it was like we were innocents. They didn't want anything to do with us. They were dragging our name through the mud. And then after George Floyd was killed, everything changed. They're putting in racism on the field. We got stickers everywhere. they're asking me to be on the to help lead some of the different programs that they're running, and I never like heard an apology from them. They never like
Just felt like we're co-opting.
yeah, they never addressed the fact that like this affected us and our families. And I understood that it was a big corporation and business, but I had done so much work on myself in those couple of years that I wasn't going to go to a place where I didn't feel welcome. You know, and so I had, you know, made my money and I did what I came to do. I played in NFL to take care of my mom.
Right.
And so I wasn't there to be rich and be famous and all these things. I just wanted to make sure that my mom was good. And so when it came time to where I wasn't feeling connected to the game anymore, I thought about, okay, well, what was your goal? And, you know, I have higher level goals, you know, but ultimately what I wanted to do was take care of my mom, and I had done that. And I didn't feel like I needed to play football anymore, so I stepped away from it.
New chapter, turn the page. So what are some of your goals now?
Well, it was really important to me to write this book and write it fresh. I never thought that I'd be an author. I didn't see myself writing a book. But I felt like no one else was going to tell this story. The NFL is definitely not going to tell it. The media is not going to tell it. And I wanted to tell it while it was fresh on my mind, not wait, 15, 20 years from now. So that was really important for me as a goal. But the next space that I really want to get into is like this wellness and healing center, like self-realization type of space.
Okay.
So yeah, if I had a blank check today, I would try and build one of these places and make it affordable for everyone. I've been super lucky because of the NFL to have all these touch points with different modalities of healing, and so I want that to be available to everyone. I think that when people decide that they want to work on themselves and they want help, that there should be a place for them to go to get that. And
What are some of these modes of health? I know you took a couple of ayahuasca trips. You mentioned that in the book,
Yeah.
and that was an awakening for you. What are some of these things that we can use as coping mechanisms, or I guess alternative ways to heal?
yeah, I think that self-care is really interesting in the fact that a lot of what we do in every day can be self-care if you recognize it that way. When people are going through a tough time, some people don't take care of themselves. They don't have good hygiene. So the fact that you get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you lotion your skin, you take a shower, like all of these things are genuinely self-care. You're taking care of this thing that's bringing you around.
Typically, don't think about it that way.
But we don't think about it that way.
But
So when we shift our mindset to start to see like, wow, the things that I'm putting into my body, the way that I'm getting my sleep, like all of these things can be self-care. But then, yeah, there's meditation. And then, there's a gratitude practice. And then there's getting into plant medicine. But yeah, I think that's why building a place like this is so important, is that we can show people that your everyday hobbies and investments that you're making into yourself, that's self-care. And if we start to see it that way, then our lives will start to feel more fruitful and more full.
so I'm gonna go back a little bit. It was one of your teammates I wanted to touch on. Glenn Foster.
Yeah.
Because that seemed like a real kind of spark. That kind of spark what became this, what was a seed, but became this tree and that's flourishing now. Let's honor his memory and talk a little bit about him.
Yeah. So Glenn Foster was one of my teammates in New Orleans. We came in together in 2013 with the Saints, and he was killed in custody of law enforcement. His case is still open. There has been no justice on his case. I think it was in 2021. And he was, basically strangled to death in custody. And somewhere in the South, I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, and this was happening while we were already years into the protests. And so it just goes to show how this could happen to any of us, and how the NFL has done nothing to try and help his case. And yeah, we talk about the NFL being a brotherhood and caring about our players, and it's obviously incredibly sad to be able to lose one of our brothers in this way, especially while we were like in the fight.
So you have a lot of good quotes. You have a lot of good quotes in this book. You have one from MLK Jr. Everyone has the power for greatness, not fame, but greatness, because greatness is determined by service. Let's talk about that quote, and let's talk about service.
Yeah, I mean, what I say a lot is the reason I am the way that I am is because of the people that have showed up for me in my life. You know, there was times when we couldn't afford to play sports. There was times when I needed a place to stay, people to feed me, and I always had them. And when I think about my upbringing, I know that I wouldn't be where I am now without them. And so I say in the beginning of the book that I serve with their spirit in mind. And to me, and that's what it's all about, right? As soon as we should be able to share and give back within our community. And that's always what has felt right for me. And I'm super lucky to have had those people in my life. And my only ask for other people is that, you know, that I show up for is that they do the same thing.
So I want about to open it up for questions to the audience, but is there anything that you want to leave them with before we open it up to questions, or anything that we didn't touch on that you feel is important to your journey, past, present, and future?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Good question.
Got any questions from the audience?
I don't have a question.
Okay.
I have a comment. I'm over here flashing. I don't know why I'm hiding. But
A lot of bodies.
but I just want to. I don't know your story, right? But I feel like whatever you were doing, like you were talking about being in alignment with your fellow teammates, you know, in the NFL. It was whatever you was doing or whatever you've been working on. It came across my path for a reason. And it's an honor to hear a young man, speak about the trauma and actually being vulnerable in a group of people that, like I said, I haven't met you, you know, but it's an honor. I'm familiar with football. That wasn't a thing, but you mentioned about starting something for the community and getting out. And I don't know where you reside, and you did different charity cases, but how could I put this? Ooh. I commend you. You know, from, you know, brown girl, brown woman, whatever. Certain things you spoke on, it brought flashbacks and the therapy and all of that. And I've been on that journey. I just wrote a book collabing with other women that I didn't know, but like I said, whatever it is that God has for you, stay in alignment. Get your crew, your team that's always going to surround and guide you. Because whatever it is, you got greatness in you. So I appreciate your story and you being vulnerable as a man.
That you drew from? Did you write everything out, or have a typewriter, or like what was the process like?
Yeah, so it took me 8 months. I initially was going to have a co-writer. I hired somebody. We did 10 interviews of 1 hour. And when I got the first 3 transcripts back, I told them, don't send me anyone. I'm going to write this on my own. I didn't think that the transcripts sounded like me, and that was really important. And so, yeah, old school on pen and paper, made an outline of the things that I thought were important, the different parts of the story that I fully remembered and what would tie back into each other. And then I was super lucky that since college, whenever we could first start to screenshot things, I screenshot everything. You talk shit about me on Twitter, I got it. I got everything. No burner account, but every email. No, I don't got no burner. Oh, I did have one burner in college, but it was because I got kicked off Twitter. That wasn't a true burner. It was just I was trying to have fun. But yeah, every email. So like I talk in the book, I make a little quick mention to it because I didn't want to tell it myself too much. But the Dolphins tried to put in their player handbook that it was against the team rules to take a knee. And so when they sent the player handbook out, I got that right away. I screenshotted it and then I leaked it to the media. And so then immediately the media got it, and then immediately they caught fire and they had to take it out. And so I have like every screenshot of everything that happened from 2016 all the way up until now. And I still do the same thing. So when it was time to write, I just went on my computer, typed in 2016, and then just started scrolling. Scrolling, then I just made a file, potential book. And so then I had everything that I remembered plus all of the receipts. And then, yeah, just started writing. I had to hit a word count. And so I just was on the computer typing that thing out. And I was traveling a ton, and just like, I really felt called to this project. I did not feel like I was ever gonna write. I loved writing in school. I didn't really apply myself because I was just trying to be have good enough grades to make sure that I could play. But yeah, I enjoy the writing process. I journal a ton, and yeah, I felt like I was a good storyteller. And so I didn't know necessarily how the book was going to be received, but I knew that I had a good story to tell, and that if people were interested, they could learn something from it and potentially add, some value to their life.
Got a question for you, man. You had you said something earlier in your talk that kind of registered, right? You're talking about like that tough mentality, keeping it rolling, especially having goals set and whatnot. So given that, all that you've gone through and the solutions that you've sought out, is there like advice you would give, especially in this area or era of information where there's so many things you can find online or so many, reels you can watch on Instagram on therapy and whatnot, right? With that mentality or that upbringing in mind, where would you start? Like, how would you filter through that noise and say, like, okay, this is where I'm gonna go and start to get help, and not just save a reel and have a list of information I can go read,
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's different for every individual. The thing that I carried the most trauma from that affected my life was growing up seeing somebody lie and cheat. Like my dad used to take me with him to go do his work. And so to me, I thought that was like what everybody did. I looked up to my dad. Even though he didn't raise me, he played in the NFL. So what he did, I'm like, this is how it's supposed to be. And so I had to learn how to stop lying, bro. I was lying about everything, just for fun. See what I can get away with. And until I looked in the mirror and was able to understand that that's not who I wanted to be, but that I also had to make the decision consistently every time I had the opportunity to tell the truth and be honest, even if people weren't going to like it, even if I was going to hurt their feelings, then it didn't matter. And so I think it's on us to really pull that mirror out and look and see what is hindering us. Really reflect about what our blocks are. For me, it was that. Yeah, just and once I was able to stop lying to everybody else, and I was able to be honest with myself. And so, yeah, it's different for everyone. But at the start, you got to be willing to. You want to do the work. You got to be vulnerable, right? And then be accountable to the shit that you see when you pull the mirror out.
Yeah. Oh, her in the back and then you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for this. I'm so looking forward to reading the book. My question is about, I love that you mentioned process, what I'm interpreting as process, because I'm a fan of that a lot of people see the end result and don't see the process of getting to where one wants to be. And I love that you mentioned failure. And so I'm curious as to whether the notion around the protest in the NFL is seen as a success. Do you feel like it achieved what it needed to achieve? Or how do you look back on, how do you reflect on it? And I know this is probably covered in the book, but I'm just wanted to hear your thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
no, I actually don't really like
You're really
close up
yeah.
the protest portion of it, so this is a great question. I personally feel like a success because of the decisions that I've made. I'm proud of myself, proud of my brothers that, made the decisions that they've made. But overall, I don't know if I can view the protest like there wasn't an outcome that I could see as a success. There's individual successes upon that journey. Yesterday I spoke in Oklahoma City, and this white man was like, because of you, I changed my whole career, got into criminal justice. I went got my master's. Now I'm educated. These people, I got my own friend. And so that's a success story.
Mm-hmm.
But were we able to really make the substantial change that I think that the NFL is capable of making? No. And to me, that I'm an extremist. I want that type of success. So yeah, in some ways I see it. But in other ways, I think I know we had a lot more power as players and as the NFL to be leaders of this country and everywhere else.
Gentlemen in the beautiful dashiki.
Thank you. Or as you I just have a comment, and it's what you were stating, because on the public side, I grew up on sports, played football, and tried a couple of others, but athletes were looked upon as being the leaders, whether you were just the jock or whether you were steering people to go the right way. Where's the good parties at? They came to us. Where shouldn't we go? They came to us. So looking at football from back in the day up until that point, as an athlete, I felt let down that you gave that, not you, but the NFL players gave that power away and not knowing how to come together. It may not have been for all, but it would have been for the group. And I took part of the boycott, not watching games, and I was having withdrawals. Monday I was going to the room, spinning, like, no, I can't watch. As an athlete, wanting that competition, but I was really let down, like, guys, you didn't do the right thing, because here I am out protesting at 70-some years old, doing the same thing from the 60s. And I'm going like, when is it going to stop? You really got the power, and if you're just looking at your paycheck, look at everybody's paycheck, they're not going to do it. They are going to come to the table. They did it in Memphis for the bus boycott. It took a while, but they said, okay, hey, look, we're losing too much money. We have to come to some agreement. So with that quick thing, and we knew, the public, that nonprofit was a sham, and it was just to pay somebody to quiet them down. But we stuck with Kaepernick, and I stuck the whole year out. And now I'm looking at it side-eye, watching the games. But now I see how the NFL players are and NFL. And it's no more that kind of trust, rah-rah anymore.
I'd like to piggyback that. I talk about it with my wife often, but I like to say that you, at least for me personally, y'all liberated me, because I'm a big sports dude, as David can tell you, which is probably why he picked me to moderate this. And from 11 to 11 every Sunday, my attention was locked in to a TV, trying to find a game. Like, that's 12 hours, every Sunday. 4 Sundays a month, you multiply that out, like how much time you're spending just watching that game. And I realized I was becoming a little bit more productive, and I gained so many hours just from supporting the boycott. And now I don't have those withdrawals anymore. You know what I mean? I watch a side eye here and there, but I just feel like it. You know what I mean? Y'all shook something up within the people. You know what I mean? And I love sports. Like, you know what I mean? Sports athletes. I wasn't into comic books or anything like that. They were my superheroes. Y'all were my superheroes. And so for somebody like me to be able to, you know what I mean, turn the TV off, I think it was powerful.
Yeah.
Got any more questions? Oh.
I have a comment and I guess 2 questions. One is I saw that one of your last interviews was with Debbie Brown, and her book, Living Wisdom and, processing grief is amazing. And I can see how some of your language about healing and therapy are some of the components of her book. I think that when we think about what you lost, it's definitely a grieving process and all of the 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 steps of grief that we go through as we cycle back and forth through the stages, right? But it looks like you're pretty much in acceptance, and I know sometimes somewhere in acceptance comes joy. So my question is about hindsight from growing up as a little boy, wanting to be an NFL star, and then boom, it stops. In hindsight, how do you celebrate that change? Because the Creator laughs at our plans, right? I think looking at you, not knowing you or anything like that, I think it was a gift. Probably the hardest to receive for you, because I see in foresight, which is my second question, that your future is so much more valid. It's so much more valuable than just a player on that field entertaining us every Sunday. You're providing awareness, consciousness, and you put your whole career on the line for justice. So I guess my question is, what does hindsight teach you when you look back on that process, having a little bit more acceptance at it now? I'm sure you're going to forever grieve it of some sorts. But then how does your future look now? How does it look different?
Yeah, I never thought that I would have more joy than catching a football and scoring touchdowns and playing in the NFL. I thought that was the peak of my existence. And that sounds sad to me now. I think as a kid, that sounds amazing. But yeah, I've been super lucky to connect to nature. I started snowboarding and surfing in this chapter of my life. And I couldn't really do those things growing up. I was afraid of the ocean, even though I grew up in San Diego. I would go in the water and get the sand off me, but once I couldn't touch the ground, I would panic. I couldn't go out past the break. And so, yeah, I've spent a lot of time doing things that are uncomfortable. And that's one of the main messages from the book, is to lean into the stuff that's hard, finding things that you don't like. We talk about the cold tub, right? People don't like the cold plunge because it doesn't feel good. It's like, well, yeah, okay, well, if you can manage to start to get in the cold tub for 30 seconds and then a minute and then 2 minutes, then you're teaching yourself how to do something that you don't like. And there's a lot of stuff that we got to do all the time that we don't like. And so, yeah, just learning how to build resilience and continue to do that as an adult. Learning to surf and snowboard taught me that because I had to suck.
Yeah.
I went from being the best at something to now going out there and asking somebody to teach me something in a place where there's not a lot of black people. I'm on the mountain in Aspen, Colorado. There's 5 black people there. and I'm supposed to be a professional athlete, and I'm busting my ass all over the mountain. And so that process of learning something new and building myself up like that again has taught me what it's going to be like to do anything else. If I want to be an entrepreneur, if I want to write a book, whatever it is, I'm going to have that beginner's mentality again. And so learning that, really helped with the joy. But the way that I look at, the other main theme of this book is to follow your calling, right? And so I was resistant to getting involved in the protest, but not really, I have always prayed for God to use me for the plan, whatever that is, and that I'm ready for that, and that I can execute at the highest level. And that's still what I pray for. And so my resistance was more worried about what people were going to think, or worried about what my coach said, or worried about my contract. It was never about me. I'm ready for whatever I'm called to do, but I have to be aware enough to know that it might not be in alignment with what everyone else is seeing for me or thinking for me. And so this one instance of following my calling has led me to now, when something's on my heart, just to move on it. And that's what this book was. I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to write a book, but I'm being told I need to write a book, so here I am. So that is why that is one of the most important themes in the book to me, is for everyone. Because you're gonna feel uncomfortable, you're not gonna know why, but you're gonna be called to something. Make sure you answer that call, because it's gonna lead you to the place that you're supposed to be in, and that's why I'm here now. Yeah.
Got time for a couple more questions? Yes, sir.
When I hear you talk about Michelle Alexander and James Baldwin and John Lewis, I'm hearing you name people that have been able to give language to things that most Black people feel every day, but don't have the language to be able to articulate for themselves all the time. And so I'm curious, it's a simple question, but what did it feel like for you to finally have that context and the language to describe and articulate the things that you may have felt at one time in your life, and finally be able to make sense of it in his historical and socio-political, right, sort of context? That's the first question. And the second question is, who are you reading now? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that having the statistical knowledge and the history is what like empowered me, but radicalized me for real.
Yeah.
You know, one of the women that left me a blurb for the book is Dr. Rita Walker, and she wrote The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, which is a great book. If you have not picked it up, you should. But oh my goodness, like that was like so freeing for me to be able to like hear somebody, read somebody, write about my experience and put it into words that I could understand and that I could explain to other people. I'm like, look, this is it right here. And so I really encourage people to pick that up. I just read Asada Shakur's autobiography after she passed. And I was reading Octavia Butler. I hadn't read any fiction, and I wanted to get into the fiction space, so I read Parable of the Sower, and I'm reading the second of that now. But I haven't had a lot of time to read in this moment, to be honest. I'm doing an audiobook for this now, so we should have that hopefully by spring, summer. And after writing the book and giving it to the publisher and editing and stuff, I turned it in 2024. And so I've stayed away from it because once you edit something, you read it so many times, you're like, bro, this thing needs to go. So, yeah. So now I'm rereading the book so that I can get the tone right, so that everyone hears my voice, feels exactly what I meant in the pages. So I'm not reading anything at the moment, but I have been trying to get into more Black fiction writers, because I do so much nonfiction stuff that I just need to get out there and expand my mind a little bit.
What's the name of the book again? Unapologetic.
The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. Yeah, I did a Instagram live with her in 2019 or 2020 when the book first came out. And then just last year it became a New York Times bestseller. Wow. Yeah, so that is another reminder that to keep pushing and know that your time will come when it comes. You know, it took her 5 or 6 years, but eventually it caught on, so.
I think we're going to end with that.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier self-care being like essential to you as you were like navigating the social justice activism work that you were doing. And so you also mentioned that you wanted to either like relaunch the Kenny Still Summit or build like a new space for self-care and wellness. And I'm wondering how you envision incorporating like community care into that as like a continued act of resistance and also as a extension of self-care.
Yeah, that's a great question. I basically have not combined the two yet. My thought process was like, okay, activism is on one side, healing is on the other. And so this place that I would like to build is about helping people become the best version of themselves in hopes that they can go back into their communities and that'll be a domino effect on their community. I think I like what you're asking because that reminds me that there also has to be a portion of, you know, community care involved in that. And that's something that I'll start to think about more. But ultimately, like my hope was, and what happened to me was during COVID is when John Lewis passed. And after something happened where some legislation changed like really quickly after he passed. And I just thought to myself, like, damn, I could spend my whole life in service, in politics, working for the government. And then as soon as I die, they just take one stroke of a pen and everything that I've ever worked for is now, it's gone. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, how do I shift gears here in order to make the work that we're doing meaningful for the long run, forever? And so I thought that working towards the healing space and working on individuals was the best way to do that. And obviously working on myself was the first way to do that. And so, yeah, my focus has become more about healing myself, healing the people around me, and hoping that those types of people get in positions of power, and then that kind of, sparks the domino. But thank you for that.
We'll give it up for these winners. So you guys look around, you breathe, and that whole thing. I would like to do something before we part ways. You got an announcement, David? Okay. So I wanted to do an affirmation exercise that from your book in the pull quote. So I would like for everybody to repeat after me. I am deserving. I am ready to receive and currently receiving. Compassion and purposeful growth in my life. Good health, unconditional love. And infinite compassion.
And infinite compassion.
Thank you.